name is Bob DeYoung. I am the Assistant Executive Director for THSADA. In addition to the 3 conferences that we put on each year, we love to do specific webinar-based professional development for our ADs. This is another example of that. Today is a Better Health Means a Better You webinar provided by Abby England, which we'll introduce in just a minute. But we have 2 esteemed guests today. We have Ray Zepeda from Sci-Fair, and we have Jennifer Frazier from McKinney. Kind of leading into today's webinar, we know that we're in the home stretch of the school 21-22 school year. If I asked any one of the 2 ADs on screen, or any coach or any student, they could tell you exactly how many days are left in the school year. Probably it's in the 20s right now. Hopefully it is for both of you guys. We also know that May is Mental Health Awareness Month. So how appropriate is this discussion today to see how we're coping with the stresses of the job, what we're noticing in our colleagues, how we can help each other, what's important, reminders for us to stay healthy physically and mentally. And Abby's going to do a great job going over those things today. And Ray and Jen are going to talk about their experiences as an AD and also a leader in our profession. Summer's right around the corner, and so we know that that's a chance for us to maybe recharge our batteries. And some of the things we'll talk about today are good things you guys can implement, our ADs across the state, over the summer months. So when you hit the ground running in September and August, maybe we're more prepared to live a healthier lifestyle. Abby England is a national board certified health and wellness coach. She's been doing this a long time. She's very good at what she does. She has a lot of good things to offer today. So I'm going to go ahead and turn the program over to Abby. Abby, thanks for being here today. We really appreciate your time. Abby, go ahead.
Thank you. Thank you, Bob. Hello, everyone. I appreciate the opportunity to be here with you all. Ray and Jennifer, thank you guys for also being here and for agreeing to be in the hot seat somehow. A little bit about me. I actually come from the periphery of your space. I led marketing for Nedco Sports for the last 7 to 8 years, and left that recently to pursue my passion of health and wellness and to become a national board certified health and wellness coach. Kind of where that passion comes from is my dad was a coach growing up, and he then moved into athletic administration. And so I've seen firsthand the stress of the job, the spotlight that it has, and the level of responsibility on your guys' shoulders. A lot of times you set the tone for not only your athletic personnel, but also the community. For me and kind of where I grew up, my high school and sports within the high school were really kind of the center folk of the community. It was a 1 high school community, and people rallied around athletics. And so you guys have a lot of stress and a lot on your plate and a lot of balls that you juggle in the air. And so I hope today we spend some time and we carve out a little time for you to think about what you need, because it's just important for you guys to prioritize your mental and physical health so that you can show up as your best self every day. And to show up as your best self, you need health. And so that's why we're here today, to talk about how better health means a better you. So in order to show up as your best self, you need energy, stamina, vitality, vigor, verve, whatever you want to call it. You've got to replenish your cup. You pour into your coaches, your staff, your athletes, but you can't pour from an empty cup. So it's important to refill your energy tank consistently and intentionally. And so the word energy can be a little elusive. And so in order to fill one's cup, we look at the 4 pillars of health, which are food, sleep, movement, and stress management. They're really the foundation for more energy. Before we get too far into the content, let me just take a minute here and share just a medical disclaimer. Everything we talk about here today is for educational purposes. Should you feel you need the advice of a medical practitioner, I strongly encourage you to go to your doctor, physician, clinician, whoever is your healthcare provider, and get the help that you need. The goal of today, this webinar today, is to, one, introduce you and bring some awareness to the 4 pillars of health. We're going to talk a little bit about how they interact with each other. In our time today, we won't have the time to get into every pillar of health. In my full wellness workshop, we do get into it. Today, it's kind of going to be a snippet of that. But you're still going to do some exercises and answer some questions to assess where you're at today. Identify what a 10 looks like for you. And then I know this is a group of action-oriented people, so we're going to set some goals on where you want to be in the next year with your health. And so the kind of the foundation of where you're at today and where you want to be is those 4 pillars of health: food, sleep, movement, and stress management. What you can expect is, you know, to maybe hold the mirror up honestly to yourself and just discern where you're at today on some of these items. I will go into a bit of education on a couple of the pillars, and then let's set some goals. Let's go after the things that we want. Before we get too far into the content, there is an accompanying one-pager. I would highly recommend you print it off and you follow along as you watch this webinar. If you haven't done that yet, you can scan this QR code and access the one-pager and print it out. I would strongly recommend you do that because there is power in writing. Writing your answers down doesn't just help you remember, it also makes your mind more efficient by helping you focus on the important stuff, and your mental and physical goals should absolutely qualify as the important stuff. So let's start with the end in mind. Let's start with where you want to be. And let's start with identifying those health goals. So Jennifer, let's maybe start with you first. Over the course of the next year, if you were to think about, you know, you or your staff's 3 biggest health goals, you know, whether that be physical health or mental health, what would those be?
Well, I think, you know, I think probably the first thought that comes to my mind is just, you know, kind of getting to interact with our staff as a whole across the district. I think a lot of people just, you know, I don't think any of us will claim that we are out of the pandemic, but we are coming out. But I think a lot of people, it's kind of the joke that, you know, we put on the 10 or 15 pounds during the pandemic because we weren't getting out and we were kind of stuck at home. So I think probably if I kind of had to evaluate my staff and just kind of the feedback that I get, I think in our coaches in our district would probably just be that they just are looking, maybe wanting to just get back to a healthier state, maybe just, you know, shedding those pounds that possibly they picked up during the pandemic. And then, you know, which would translate to just more energy. And you know, I heard something the other day that I think is so true that, you know, when you're tired, you can go home and take a nap and it kind of helps you rejuvenate. But I really think our people are depleted right now. And depleted is really just, you really have to sit back and you have to evaluate what do I need to do to fill what you're talking about, to fill my cup. And so I would say that the physical, just being physically fit and getting back to where we're starting to prioritize our health, and hopefully this summer just being able to take some time where they can really focus and get out and kind of focus on some of the movement pieces that you talked about would probably be the big thing I would think about for our district and our staff within our district.
Thank you. Yeah, that depleted is bigger than just I need to take a nap. That depleted means I need to intentionally carve out some time and gradually fill my cup back up. Ray, what about you? What comes up for you?
Well, I think I want to build off of what Jennifer kind of talked about. And one of the things I think that we've been dealing with both with our staff and then also our students is really, you know, we've noticed over the past couple of years coming out of the pandemic really a lot of issues with really our mental health and our approach and how we see things. And so it's been a very difficult time, I think, in our profession and throughout our society over the past couple of years. And we've noticed really a huge increase in anecdotal reports of teachers and coaches struggling with their mental health on a daily basis. And so I think that when you're not in your right headspace, I think it impacts everything around you. So I think first and foremost, trying to have some type of improvement in our collective mental health, I think that that's very important. Secondarily, if anybody's going to be a great role model for our community in regard to their physical health, I think it should be coaches. And so trying as a staff to be able to successfully perform the responsibilities associated with our professional positions, I think that that's really contingent on really having great stamina and being in great shape. So trying to find time to lead a healthy lifestyle as a coach, which might sound kind of really crazy to even suggest that might be difficult, but it is with the time demands that our coaches have placed on them. But finding that time to carve out time for yourself and for movement, I think is very important. And then I think I would build on kind of what both of you just said about the renewal of personal energy. When I talk to our coaches and our teachers, they're exhausted right now. And so I do think an improvement in mental health and in physical health obviously leads to an improvement in our personal energy, but I think it's an important enough goal to be a singular goal in and of itself. And so finding that time to renew yourself, I think, is exceedingly important. I've heard a lot of people talk about work-life balance. I don't know if that's possible in our roles or even in the role of a coach, but I do think that you need to find seasons of your year and your life and your routine where you do find that time to renew to sustain you through the times when you're a little bit more busy in your professional capacity.
Yeah, the idea of the coach is that challenge you put out around the coaches kind of being a model for health. That's a good challenge because I know they're role models for a lot of people. So to just kind of piggyback off of that question a little bit, Ray, let's fast forward a year from now, and let's say your coach and your coaches and staff, they did accomplish those health goals that they set out for themselves. What's different?
I think first and foremost, they'd have a more positive outlook, about their lives, about where they are in the profession, just about their jobs in and of themselves. And so I think that positivity would help their total approach and their engagement with our community and most importantly, their students. I think also just having additional energy to handle the professional demands that they have placed on them on a daily basis. And then finally, I think that it would help to create really more buy-in for their jobs and having a place in our profession. And so that might lead to better employee retention. I think all of us have seen that we're kind of seeing educators leave our profession in large numbers. And if you're in a better space mentally and physically, I think that that's going to lead to more positivity at work and then allow us to retain more of the quality coaches that we really need to be working with our kids in our community.
Yeah. Jennifer, just to kind of switch it over to you, you mentioned about filling the cup, intentionally filling one's cup. Let's say they did, and a year from now, your coaches and staff, you saw them intentionally doing things to fill their cup. What would be different about their lives as compared to now?
Well, I think, I think it's very hard. I don't think it's natural for people to self-reflect. I don't think that's a natural. I think we really have to be intentional with that. And we have already used the word intentional several times in our discussion. And so I believe, if we can position ourselves to where we can lead as, for example, for Ray and I to be the leaders of our district, if we can convince our coaches or motivate them or encourage them to hopefully spend some time this summer to fill themselves, to work on, so that they're not coming back and they're not depleted. I think that involves discipline, and they're really going to have to discipline themselves. And I think, I heard a study one time, I think it was at Duke University, that said, 60% of the choices we make are not conscious decisions every day. They're just out of our daily habits. They're just things that we daily, habitually do. And so I think if we can start to change that, and we can see in a year from now we can see people that are physically fit, that are, mentally, maybe a little bit mentally, more positive, then I think that will also come across in the way that they act with their parents and their athletes. And in those intense settings, I believe we will see a more disciplined approach in that, because I kiddingly said this year that I think I may write a book that says the title of it's going to be Stuff I Can't Make Up. And I just think, I really believe coming out of the pandemic, we are just, if you as a leader are unsettled, then the people that are following you will be unsettled. And it's as plain as that. And I believe that the 4 pillars that you're talking about, especially this, if we can start to kind of turn the knob and swing the pendulum in the other way, and we can start to get back control of how we feel as coaches and as leaders, then those around us will do better. And I think the perspective I've always believed so much that, what you perceive a situation to be is how you're going to receive it. And then that's what you're going to get. And so kind of to Ray's point, and kind of to all of us, if we can come out and we can start to kind of work on getting ourselves in a healthier frame of mind, whether it's physically, mentally, then we are going to start walking into situations and we're going to start to perceive things with a more positive outlook and a more positive approach, which then, therefore, I believe we will start to receive things differently, which will then impact everybody around us. And we'll become leaders that aren't unsettled, and we'll start to become a little bit more, feet firm on the ground, which then will return to our kids and our athletes and our parents following a more positive approach, I believe.
Yeah. I think what I heard in both of your responses was the idea of the ripple effect. Like that first ripple, you guys are kind of the center at the ripple, and you impact so many other people that surround you and the coaches, and you really set the tone and set the example. So question kind of for the audience to think about. If a year from now you did accomplish your health goals, what could you do next summer 2023, that you can't do now? That thing that you want energy for. Write it down. And so we talked a little bit, we kind of touched on at a high level the 4 pillars. Jennifer and Ray, I'm curious, which of these 2 maybe are most pressing, most top of mind for your staff?
Well, I'll go first. I think for me, probably the one that would jump out of my mind quickest is probably just stress management right now. I'm at a place right now where I'm doing some end of year, just kind of visits with some of our coaches. And I think, I used the word depleted earlier, but I think Ray mentioned we are definitely, as educators right now, it's tough. It's tough. Our kids are a little bit different. Our parents are different, but more importantly, life is still happening. And so we still have, we have sickness in our families. We have that work-life balance that Ray talked about, but everything just seems to be a little bit heavier right now and a little bit harder to maneuver. And so, these aren't things that weren't happening before the pandemic, but I think coming out of the pandemic, I think it's becoming a little bit harder for people to manage it like they have in the past. And so I think just that stress management piece of just really kind of trying to be able to just, kind of draw those boundaries and really just say, okay, I'm going to give this much of myself to this. And then beyond that, I have to step back and I have to let it go. And I really see that just really being jumbled for my coaches right now a little bit, and just kind of really looking forward to the summer to hopefully trying to kind of get away from some of that.
Yeah. Ray, what about you?
Well, I looked at the preparation materials trying to get ready for this webinar, and the thing that really jumped out to me was the movement piece to it, because I think when you're moving in an intentional way, I think it impacts all of the other wheels that you're talking about. When I move, and it's going to reduce the stress that I feel and that I have. It's going to probably allow me to have a little bit better sleep, and I think it's the beginning that then helps you to make some healthier choices with the food that you eat. So. I think our coaches are more active than most in society just because of their roles, but it might not be the type of intentional activity that leads to great health gains. And so I know, like, even for myself as a professional, one of the things that I started doing in the past year was before I come into work, I purposely go out on about a 30, 45-minute walk and think about my day and get out in nature. And I think that really helps me when it comes to stress management. And I know that if our coaches intentionally moved in a consistent basis, I think that it would impact positively the other aspects of health that we've talked about today.
Yeah, you guys both talked about how they're all these pillars kind of intertwine together, and they all work together to reduce the risk of chronic illnesses. But stress management and movement really sound like they're kind of at the forefront. So let's start with stress management first. And we're going to do actually an exercise. So if you are following along on your one pager, go to the stress section, find the stress wheel, and do this exercise with us. The wheel is divided into 10 different pie slices because stress itself is kind of a nebulous word. It means many different things to many different people in many areas of our lives. So to help us kind of hone in and focus on your unique areas that might be causing more stress than other areas, we're going to do the stress wheel exercise. So like I talked about, the wheel is divided into 10 pie slices, each one representing a common area of our lives that can cause stress. But please feel free to personalize this wheel. If one area just doesn't make sense or isn't relevant to you, replace it with something else. I mean, please personalize this wheel for whatever is going to be most relevant for you. And every stress is different. So let's assess kind of the highest areas of stress in your life. Stress being anything that causes frustration, anger, sadness. The inner spoke of the wheel is 0 and the outer spokes are 10. So on a scale from 0 to 10, visually draw a line and rate each area. 0 being no stress, 10 being high stress. And over to the right, you can see an example of what a completed stress wheel might look like. And if you need to take a minute, please pause this recording and really give yourself a few minutes to really think about these different areas of your life and rate the stress. So Ray, let's maybe start with you. If you were to look at maybe your staff's collective completed wheels, what insights might you draw from that observation?
Well, kind of going back to a lot of what we already covered, as I talk to coaches formally and informally, out at events or like in a formal setting here in our offices, I know a lot of them express frustration that the pressures and the demands of their work and their job and their career really, and the stress involved with that really starts to outsize their ability to handle the other aspects of their life that might be represented here on this wheel, which then in turn creates stress in and of itself. And so I think finding ways of trying to successfully speak into that for our employees and help them to successfully manage the demands of the work to allow them to feel that they can address the other 9 areas, I think is something that has been a challenge for our staff here in central office. And we've talked a lot about how do we give them tools and the abilities to be able to successfully navigate what's happening here so that they can have some type of work-life balance and then be able to feel like that this is a sustainable lifestyle for them to be in our profession, serving kids in our community.
So if that number, let's say in the work, job, career category, let's say if it was an 8 and it moved to a 7, even one more lower, you're saying it would have a positive impact on all the other pie slices. Exactly.
And I think right now what I'm hearing is that the pressure that they feel related to their jobs might be a 10 plus. And then because they're not addressing the other areas that are listed here, that it starts to artificially kind of create more stress in each of these areas where maybe that stress is really not necessary or even something that is a reality, but just not having the time to address those other areas creates a lot of stress and a lot of feeling of being overwhelmed. And I think Jennifer mentioned earlier, really being personally exhausted.
Mm-hmm. So we need to have like a spinal tap 11 on the outside of the 10. Jennifer, what about you? If you could be a fly on the wall, you know, with your coaches and staff completing their wheels, what might you observe?
Well, I think, you know, the thing that jumps out to me on this wheel right now, especially with a lot of our young coaches, and, you know, Ray mentioned that we're seeing a lot of our coaches getting out of the profession. I spoke to 2 yesterday that are just literally walking away from education as a whole and going into completely different, you know, into completely different industries. And I think the finances right now are really a burden on our coaches. You know, trying to find a house right now where we live, and just to try the living costs and gas, and you know, it's just you know, it's a challenge. And then so then you add the commute to the already long days, you know, where they're showing up at 5 in the morning and not getting home until 10 o'clock at night. And then you add a 50-minute commute because they have to live in a community where they can afford. It is taxing on our coaches. And I think, you know, I think to summarize what I'm hearing you and Ray say is that, you know, when you identify on this chart, when you identify that, you know, maybe there's just a lot of stress coming from the financial piece of my life. But what am I doing? I think the challenge is, what are we doing to what I went back to say earlier is that, you know, if we continue to do what we do every day and we don't change anything, we're going to get the same results. And so I think that's where we have to go, okay, if there's maybe one of these other pieces of the pie that is not as stressful for me, or maybe you know, I could focus a little bit more on that, and I can't change the finances. I can't change what I get paid as a teacher and a coach, but I might be able to change maybe getting up in the morning, like Ray mentioned, and walking 45 minutes before I come to school. And it starts to balance some of that out. And again, if we're not willing to make the small changes in our day-to-day habits, then we're not going to see different results. We just won't. And I think people are getting stuck right now. I think people are stuck. And I really just, the self-reflection is really great. And it kind of helps people understand, okay, this is a 10 for me, but this is a 0. So where can I kind of maybe bring both of them down, or maybe just kind of, you know, adjust so that overall I'm a healthier individual.
Yeah. Well, let me just ask you a follow-up question to that. Well, really all 3 of you, Bob, Jennifer, Ray, you all are very experienced in your careers, and you've seen a lot. Jennifer, let me just start with you. What have you seen, maybe some of the impacts of those who have unmanaged stress?
I think I feel like, especially with some of our, you know, some people that maybe have been doing this for a while, I'm starting to just kind of see some complacency setting in. And I think, you know, that's kind of a scary word. And I have actually used this example a lot of times, is that, you know, sometimes, you know, people will go, well, the needle's, you know, are you moving the needle? Which way is the needle moving? And sometimes I can look and I see the needle is just kind of sitting stagnant, and it's not really moving. And we're not moving in a positive direction. It doesn't mean necessarily that we're moving in a negative direction, but it's not moving at all. We've become complacent, and we're just doing a lot of the same old things. And I would argue that over time, the needle does start to move backwards. And so I think with lack of, you know, when you just have overwhelming stress in your life and you just don't really know how to manage it, you don't have the energy and you don't have the mental capacity to really try to want to even brainstorm new ideas or try new things. And, you know, as coaches, we need to be looking at how do we connect with kids now, because we are connecting with a different type of kid than we were even just a year and a half ago. And so I think that's kind of what I'm seeing is just, and then I think too, also the lack of managed stress. I think I see it a little bit that maybe we kind of become undone a little bit quicker than we have before. So we're in that game and a referee makes a, you know, what we would deem is not a good call. Maybe we're losing our composure a little bit quicker than we have before. And, or maybe we're sending off an email a little bit quicker than we would have before. It's kind of, but those are probably the 2 areas I'm seeing it set in a little bit.
Yeah, the fuse is a little shorter. Ray, what about you? What have you seen from your coaches and staff, kind of the impacts of unmanaged stress?
Well, I'm going to first concur with Jennifer about, being quick to send that email in a reactionary way, and I get a lot of those, unfortunately. And I think then how we manage that becomes very important, to take a deep breath before you reply and how you reply. But I've kind of touched on this. I think the first and foremost is just kind of a burnout and a lack of engagement and energy. And so whether someone has actually quit their job or left the profession, I know that a lot of our folks have effectively quit trying to be their best professional self just because they're somewhat worn out, and it's just overwhelming. So, I do think the shorter fuse, absolutely. I mean, we're seeing that also with our parents, and then their short fuse then impacts, again, ours. And at some point, I think as a professional, you've got to try to be a stopper and be the person that then takes the time to send a thoughtful approach and response back instead of reactionary one. But I just think overall, though, lack of engagement, lack of energy, and being overwhelmed and exhausted, I think are the things that I see the most, really, as I talk to coaches and even get out in the community and talk with our parents.
Yeah. Yeah, you bring up a good point, is that sometimes you guys might be the brunt of whatever the reaction is, and you have a choice in that moment how to respond. Bob, I know you've been around and you've seen a lot. What, to tap into your experience, what have you seen the impacts of unmanaged stress?
That was a very nice way of saying that Bob's the oldest one in the room, that Bob's really experienced. But I'll tell you, I've been reflecting on my experiences as an athletic director over the 20 years that I did it. And so I know that some of our most important leadership qualities is really our ability to see and to listen. And if you walk in to watch a team play or watch a coach, and if you're only looking for the X's and O's, you're missing the stress things that we're talking about today. So really, our ability to watch, is a coach's behavior changing from what you're used to, or are there outbursts from the students, and how is the coach handling it? Sometimes when people are under stress, they get real quiet, so they become more inside themselves and not more extroverted, that the coach that you knew. And sometimes they just become disengaged. So really, if you're looking at those things and you see a behavior change, that's something that should kick in. Okay, it's time for me to have a talk with this kid or this coach. And it won't be about the basketball team or the basketball game they just played. It'll be about he or she and how they're doing. So that's one of the things that I like to think I did a pretty good job of, is the fact that when I noticed things that weren't the same, I have a conversation, and it was more listening than it was telling. And that helped me maybe help them get something off their chest that they needed to talk about.
Yeah.
Bob, can I also add to that? Can I also add to that too, that, I think that what you say is very important there. And I think that when you as a leader take time to have those conversations, it really strengthens your leadership. And I know that when you notice people not bringing the same energy to their job, and you just ask how they're doing, and you have an honest and real conversation with them, I think that they appreciate that. It builds a greater connection between yourself and that person. And I think it leads to a more engaged employee, because I think that they see you as caring more for them as a person, and not just what they do for you. So I think that that's exceedingly important for us as leaders to kind of to look critically at our folks with how they're doing, and then ask those questions.
Yeah, the ability to kind of identify those red lights. And our body gives us red lights. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the physiological impacts of stress. Stress affects every system in our body: musculoskeletal, respiratory, cardiovascular, endocrine, gastrointestinal, nervous, reproductive, really every system you can think of. Chronic stress works against us. And so I've got it divided here specifically so you can see long-term ongoing chronic stress increases the risk of hypertension, heart attack, stroke. It impacts the communication between our brain, our immune system, and our HPA axis, which then lends itself to mental health conditions such as anxiety and depression. And I think you might have to have living under a rock for the last several years to know that in the health and wellness space, we are learning more and more about the power of the gut, and stress impacts the gut's ability to talk with the brain, that gut-brain connection that we know about, and so which also affects physiological health and mental health. Physiologically, stress is kind of known as the silent killer. It's linked to high blood pressure, and high blood pressure then can lead to heart attack, heart failure, heart disease, as well as just poor cognitive function and dementia later in life. And we also know stress is linked to diabetes. And what's scary about diabetes is that 88 million Americans actually have pre-diabetes. That's 1 in 3, and 84% don't know they have it. And so pre-diabetes raises your risk for type 2 diabetes, later heart disease, and stroke. So that's, having ways to intentionally manage stress, kind of come out of that flight or flight, downshift our bodies is really important. And it really, your own stress management tools and techniques that are going to work best for you are those that are aligned with your preferences. Many people, don't, the word meditation kind of puts off a lot of people. Well, I could never sit there I've got a monkey mind and I could never sit there. That's okay. Even a 15-minute walk, maybe scheduled in the afternoon, just to kind of recharge the batteries for the second half of the day, or, frequent 60-minute, just short breathing exercises kind of spread throughout the day. Just finding opportunities to kind of downshift out of that fight or flight is really beneficial. So Jennifer and Ray, you guys have really everyone on this call has a high stress job. Ray, I'm curious, what's been the number one kind of non-negotiable you've put in place to combat stress?
I think it's really finding time to exercise. I know it helps me. I mentioned earlier that, having that daily walk before I even get into the office, and finding time to kind of think about my day and what I'm going to be, going through that day, and finding time 2 to 3, 4 times a week to get in the gym and lift weights and move my body. I think that really helps me to fulfill the many different roles that I have, both as an athletic director, as a parent. I've also got a junior in high school right now, and as a husband. So trying to show up in each of those roles, I find exercise to be something that helps me to manage all of that, and then also the stress that I have to deal with on a daily basis.
Yeah. You guys don't just wear this one hat. You wear other hats as well. And the other people in your lives kind of expect you to show up also. Jennifer, what about you? What's been your number one kind of non-negotiable stress management tool or technique?
Well, without a doubt, there's several things, but for me, my faith is incredibly important to me. And it's important to me regardless if I'm sitting in the seat or if I was, working down the street at the local Whataburger. So because of that, I prioritize that. And so just because I prioritize that, that's something that just, I believe, keeps me balanced. It keeps me stable, and it keeps me remembering what is important, and who I am and how I want to be. And so I think when I do get into those situations where maybe, what you want to say is not what you should say, it just really keeps me disciplined in that, to just kind of keep that, checked at the door. And this is a silly thing that I have done for myself. But I just have a PDF that I have put together, and it's just my core values of what I do. And it literally sits here in my top left drawer of my desk. And when I have those times, I just pull it out and I look at it sometimes just to channel myself again about who do I want to be in this moment? Because I believe firmly that, what is the story you want people to tell about you 6, 7, 10 years down the road? And so that really helps me just kind of stay at the core of who I want to be. And then I think just align with what Ray said. I have 3 kids. My youngest one is a senior in high school. And so I am very intentional about making sure that I see him and at least try to eat dinner with him. You know, he's with his girlfriend and friends all the time now as a senior in high school, but that matters to me as a mom. And so if I'm failing in that area, and it doesn't matter what kind of job I do as an athletic director, it will not matter. So I, like Ray, those two things matter to me tremendously.
Yeah. Sounds like keeping your values, your purpose, and your priorities kind of top of mind, you know, visually kind of staring back at you frequently throughout the day, where it just really helps to ground you.
Absolutely, 100%.
So we've talked about stress management. Let's talk about movement. And for many people, there can kind of be a notion out there that within movement, more is better, or movement is only going to the gym or doing a high intensity class, or there's kind of that maybe not with this group. I would say with my private one-on-one clients, sometimes there's that misperception in kind of the general population, but it's really, there's so many benefits of just incorporating movement and activity kind of throughout our day. So I'm going to introduce a concept called swap your way to health, and it stands for stand, walk, and push. Standing burns twice as many calories as sitting. I don't know if you've heard the phrase, but there's a phrase, sitting is the new smoking. Our metabolism actually slows down 90% after 30 minutes of sitting. It makes the body less sensitive to insulin. So there are physiological things that are happening just kind of as we're sitting. We live in a very sedentary culture. And so trying to stand for half the day, either a standing desk or, you know, kind of when your Apple Watch bings you or your phone bings you about like, hey, it's probably stand up, kind of honoring those alerts every 30 to 45 minutes to get up and just kind of move your body. There's tremendous benefits with just kind of low impact walking. The goal being try to aim for 10,000 steps a day. If you've never tracked your steps, 10,000 is pretty difficult. You really have to be intentional to hit 10,000 steps a day. So if you're hitting that one, you're likely solving for the first one, which is getting up frequently. So from a health standpoint, 10,000 steps supports a good night's sleep. It does help with weight loss, so physiologically, but also mentally. Ray, I mean, you talked about you kind of double dip in the morning and you incorporate maybe some movement, the walking, as well as just thinking about what you have ahead for the day and being outside, kind of a triple dip then, because walking has also been shown to decrease anxiety and depression. And then lastly, push. Push to try and meet the U.S. Department's Health and Human Services activity guidelines, which is at least 150 minutes per week of moderate to intensity activity, at least 75 minutes a week of vigorous intensity activity, or some sort of combination of the both, of the two. And then, muscle is the organ of longevity. And so incorporating muscle strengthening exercises at least 2 times a week, working all the major muscle groups. And so much like we talked about, you know, stress management lowers the risk of chronic illnesses. Physical activity also has been shown to lower the risk of heart disease, high blood pressure, diabetes, cancer, and even from a mental standpoint, it helps improve cognitive function and reduce the risk of depression, anxiety, things like that. So Ray and Jennifer, we appreciate your transparency on this next question. On the scale from 0 to 10, you know, 10 being, I got this totally dialed in, I can't get any better, and 0 being the exact opposite of that, how would you rate your movement, exercise activity? And whoever feels brave enough to share can go first.
Well, I don't know about you, Ray, but I think if we want to count standing at football games, we would be off the chart. I mean, we would be, you know, home run hitters. So in the fall. I will just say for me, you can look over the course of the year, and this is going to fluctuate for me a little bit. You know, per what Ray said earlier, our job does lend us to where we are out at events almost literally four or five times a week. And so we are standing and walking premises and campuses and doing things like that. But I would say for me, probably on average, I'm probably sitting at about a 6. I could do better, but I also know that I've also learned to change my workouts a little bit, so that just instead of, like, I think, you know, having been a former competitive athlete and a coach, that, you know, there used to be that time where, you know, you needed at least an hour and a half to get in a good workout with weights and cardio. Well, I don't have an hour and a half a lot of days. So I may change that back to maybe say, okay, if I get 30 minutes in, that's a win for me. So I think for me, I probably hover around a 6 on average for the entire year.
Yeah, I would just say probably very much the same thing. I think a 6 to 7, but, you know, I think that, again, that fluctuates day to day. And there's sometimes I feel like a failure with a 1 and 2, and I'm having to pound out a lot of emails at my desk. And so, you know, I did kind of, as I was listening to you, kind of reflect back in my phone and check my step count the last 3 days. And it's about a, you know, average of about 13,000 steps. But we've had events the last 3 nights. And so, you know, when you I think the job in and of itself demands that you move around quite a bit. And I think that helps from that perspective. But again, for my own mental health, I do have to find those times to intentionally get in the gym, put my headphones in, and just kind of get to work. And I do try to do that on a regular basis and have been good about that. And I think I've seen since I've started that and been committed to that it has really improved not only my mental health, but again, the energy that I bring to my job.
Yeah. So let me ask you this. You know, many people on this call and perhaps coaches throughout the state aspire to be in your shoes one day. What might sustainable movement at a 10 look like for someone in your position? Ray, let's start with you, because you seem to have a good kind of routine going.
Well, I think it is to develop a routine, you know, and I know when I get off track and I have a day where I'm a 1 or a 2, it's because I've allowed the busyness of my day to impact the intentionality that I bring to some of these activities. And so I think having a routine first in and of itself is what a 10 looks like, and sticking to that routine. I also think that if you want to be a 10, you have to find ways, small ways throughout your day of getting those extra steps in, whether that's, you know, parking a little bit further out, taking the stairs, doing some things just to kind of build some time in, so that it's not anything that's overwhelming, but that at the end of the day, you look down at your phone and you've had 13,000 steps. So I think it's just about being intentional and building in those little things throughout your day, so that then the whole is greater in and of itself.
Mm-hmm. And Jennifer, you mentioned, you know, as a former competitive athlete, as a coach, it's kind of, and now in the role you're in now, you've kind of had to reframe, and there's almost been like a mental shift towards how you approach movement. So what might sustainable movement at a 10 look like?
I think it's just redefining. And for me also too, one thing that I've started to do, I am not like to get up at 4:30 in the morning and work out. I would prefer to do mine at the end of the day. So, so just recognizing that about myself, and just knowing that that's how I am. If that meant I, you know, stay up later than everybody else to get a workout in, that's what I'm going to do personally, which is a lot different than what a lot of people like to do. But for me, I kind of tie the two together. I usually try to keep this movement piece as something my husband and I do together. And so that's a big part of who we are in our marriage, and just, you know, we're both very active individuals, and I think we're actually very disciplined individuals too. And so so this is something that just kind of walks hand in hand with that, just wanting to be with somebody throughout, you know, even if it's at the last part of the day, whatever we have left, we stick it with movement and we give it to each other, and that's what works for us.
Yeah, I see that you really kind of honor maybe a value of connection, you know, that's the importance of moving together, but also being together. And when you do the activity together, it really honors that value of connection.
Absolutely.
So that's just 2 of the 4 pillars. You can easily see how if we were to tackle all 4, we might be here for a little longer than what your schedules allow for this webinar, but you can see how food, sleep, movement, and stress management, how they are the foundation of health goals, kind of from where you're at today to where you want to be. From a health coach perspective, I am going to take 30 seconds here and just give a brief commercial on sleep. Sleep, we don't have the time right now to go through the science of sleep, but there is tremendous power in sleep. I might argue it's the most important pillar of the three. It's the Swiss Army knife, it's our superpower, and it really is kind of the foundation for the other three. And I think if you were just to reflect internally, you could kind of say, yeah, when I get a good night's sleep, it kind of sets the tone for the next day, versus when I don't get a good night's sleep, how that next day usually goes. But regardless, all four pillars of health work in harmony for health and well-being to reduce the risk of chronic illnesses like we talked about, but then also improve the quality of life. In my full wellness workshop, we'll go through all four pillars of health, and participants will then have a personalized action plan for each pillar that they can implement immediately in their lives to improve nutrition, sleep quality, stress management techniques, and kind of just general activity. So another question for Ray and Jennifer, kind of as we wrap it up. Jennifer, let's start with you. What have you observed about the performance of those on your staff, or maybe just your peers, colleagues, people you've seen, those who intentionally prioritize their mental and physical health versus those who kind of just leave it to chance?
Well, I think this webinar is a perfect example, and Ray did not pay me any money to say this, so please let me say that up front. But I think just looking at Ray and just the role he plays in his district, and just just who he is in our community of athletic directors is just, I think, a great example of, you can tell he is the ultimate professional, and he is always on point. And obviously, clearly it aligns exactly with how he prioritizes taking care of himself. And that's why he leads one of the largest districts, and if not the largest district in the state of Texas. So, that's, I think there's direct correlation. And I think it's people like Ray that, that we all should look to understand that, if we will prioritize taking care of ourselves, it will bleed into all the other areas of our life. And you just have to make it, you just have to make the commitment, and you have to understand that if you're not taking care of yourself, you cannot take care of others well. And so I think we all know that it's cliche, but we don't really truly believe it. Otherwise, we would be doing a better job of taking care of ourselves. So I think without a doubt, it has a direct correlation.
Oh, well said. Ray, what about you? What have you seen?
Well, first off, I'm going to need to bring Jennifer along as my hype man. I have 750 coaches down here that she can talk to.
Come on, Ray, I'll do it.
Sometimes they don't always believe in what we do here, but in all seriousness, I think that when you look at people that are really doing the things that you're talking about really well, that those are the people that are really successful in managing their stress. They're more positive in and out of their job. And I think that they feel that they're more balanced in being able to meet not only their professional responsibilities, but their personal responsibilities. When you're lagging, I think in any one of these four areas that you've somewhat talked about today, I think it's very, very difficult to feel positive about yourself. And then that then bleeds into every other aspect of your life. Whereas if somebody is intentionally working into each of these areas, I think that creates some confidence that you then take with you, whether it's being a parent, being a husband or wife, or being an athletic director or coach. And so those people that successfully do that, I think just feel better. And when you look at it, they look like that they're able to manage those many demands that they have being placed on them.
Yeah, we don't live our lives in compartments. What you guys both said is that all these areas, these pillars bleed together, but then the areas of our lives bleed together. And to show up as our best self in each of those areas, it does take an investment, time, energy, money, an investment in ourselves. So I'm not going to, I know this is an action group, and so I want to make sure we get that accountability in for everyone. You know, that little 14-letter word, accountability. How do we go from insights to lasting behavior change? You know, from the experience and wisdom shared by Bob, Jennifer, Ray, hopefully you guys on the call have gleaned some insights or maybe some things you want to change or improve upon. So how do we go from insights to lasting change? And that takes mental muscle and the development of habits. So I would challenge you, pick one item from both pillars, from the stress management pillar and from the movement pillar, whether something you wrote down on the one-pager or something you heard here from the panelists today. Pick one item from each pillar. It could be the one that is low-hanging fruit or the one that needs to happen before maybe some of the others can happen, but pick one. And then answer this question: what would you have to put in place to consistently do those two things? And Jennifer and Ray, I think you guys talked about this pretty extensively just in your various responses, is that usually this comes down to establishing some boundaries, setting some expectations, and keeping the commitments to yourself.
Yeah, I think oh, I'm sorry. I thought you were asking a question.
Oh, no.
Go ahead. No, you go ahead.
Well, I kind of will be asking the question. You're right. Jennifer, let's start with you. You know, how could one foster a culture of accountability with their staff to support prioritizing physical and mental well-being?
Well, I think, you know, I think for me, especially, you know, just being willing to give permission to people to set boundaries, and, you know, those that work for me, to set boundaries, to go home to your family and to do those kind of things and to know. And I think, you know, and I know Ray would echo this. We work in incredible districts. We are very blessed. We are in strong school districts with incredible support above us and incredible coaches that work for us. So we have lots of resources that allow us to stay healthy. And so I think, you know, we work for people, and I think the culture has already been set that our family matters and our life does matter. So I think just establishing boundaries would probably be the number one thing for me, that it's okay to say no to something.
Yeah, you kind of setting that example. Ray, what about you? How could you foster a culture of accountability?
I think very much along the lines of what Jennifer said. I think in our roles that we need a model for our coaches, and then message into some of what you've talked about today. I think that we have to model the type of lifestyle that can really encourage our coaches to find time to exercise, to take care of themselves. I know that we've had to more explicitly the last year or so speak into the need to take care of their mental health, and it's kind of gotten out there in the open. And I think that that's a great thing. We have a lot of counseling resources here, and we've had to point some of our employees within the past year towards those resources and say that there's really no negative, there's no stigma attached to that, and that it's going to help you to be a better coach, a better, you know, teacher, a better parent, if you take care of your mental health. And so I think that modeling and providing and being a good example is important, but I also think sometimes you have to message directly into it, whether it's establishing boundaries and giving people permission to establish those boundaries, as Jennifer mentioned, or, you know, are really encouraging people to avail themselves of resources that they might not ordinarily access, so that they really prioritize and take care of their mental health.
Yeah. You guys set the tone, set the example. So for anyone who needs an accountability partner, I'd love to play that for you. I invite you to answer those questions. What boundaries would you need to set? Who would you need to set those expectations with? And how do you honor the commitment to yourself? Send me an email, a text, a picture, whatever's easiest, kind of what you're going to put in place. My email address is abbyenglandwellness@gmail.com, and my phone number is 479-319-8020. So even a small step, even the small step of telling someone what you're going to do gets you closer to doing it. The quote at the bottom, I just love it. The relationship is imperfect, People do not always do what they say, but the act of saying it is a step towards doing it. So thank you all for taking the time to be here today. Jennifer and Ray, thank you so much for being in the hot seat and answering and sharing your advice and what your experience has led to. And then thank you guys for carving out time to be here. I hope that this information was valuable. And I think you heard from Jennifer and Ray that if you put in the time, that return on investment will be tenfold what you get out of it. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Thank you.
Abby, this has been great. I'm going to edit this comment out. I'm going to excuse Jennifer and Ray, and then Abby, you and I can close out whatever's left, if that's okay. Thank you both so much for joining us today. Appreciate the time that you've given to us. It's been a great webinar. Y'all did a fantastic job, and I'll make y'all look good, I promise, when I edit it out.
Thank you. Work hard.
That's a tough job, Bob, but at least for me. But Jennifer, so good to see you, even if it's just on a small box today. So always good to visit with you.
Thank you, Ray. You're the best. And bye, Abby. Bye, Bob.
Bye. Yep, y'all have a good day. Thanks again.
Bye.
As soon as they check out, there you go. Okay. So Abby, thanks so much for being here today. I'm hopeful that of our 1,500 members, they'll get a glimpse of this over the next 30 days or so. And I'm sure there's going to be interest in what people can do in order to have an in-person experience with you to help themselves and their staffs. Great time to do that would be the beginning of the year when you're having your coaches orientation. I think Ray and Jennifer talked a lot today about the attrition rate among teachers and coaches is higher now than it probably ever has been because of the coming out of the pandemic and the stress of the job and how communities operate right now. And people need the skills we're talking about today in order to be able to cope with those things and also overcome some of those stresses. So if you want to go over one more time, if they wanted to have a closer experience with you, what they can do.
Yeah, I'd be happy to. Let me just thank everyone. You know, my dad was an educator and a coach and then moved into athletic administration and then just, academic administration. And so I just empathize with everything you guys have had to overcome the last several years of the pandemic. And you are in a compassion business, and compassion burnout is a real thing. So I hope that what you learned here today just gives you some tools, some techniques, some information to help fill your cup. If you'd like to bring the wellness workshop, kind of the full wellness workshop experience, I am available to come on site and facilitate it with a group. Please reach out to me via email or phone call, or there's a contact form on my website, kind of whatever is your contact method of choice. I would love the opportunity to spread the word on this, because I do believe better health means a better you.
Very good. Thank you, Abby. I want to thank you one more time, and special thanks to Ray Zepeda and Jennifer Frazier. Their willingness to share their personal insights about their own lives and their families, and also what they think their coaches and staff are experiencing, was very valuable today. It was pointed out several times during the seminar today that it's important to take care of ourselves. In fact, we're better equipped to take care of others when we're putting ourselves first. It's kind of like when you get on an airplane and the flight attendant is talking to you about safety, they say, put your mask on first before you help somebody else. So taking care of yourself is of vital importance in order to be able to help others. So we're going to close out today. And once again, thank you to Abby England so much for being here today. Hope our membership enjoys this. I know they will, and takes advantage of the opportunity to have a workshop with you in person.